The laboratory's fluorescent lights flickered above as I, Dr. Lena Morgan, stood amidst my team in the heart of the city's most advanced genetic research facility. Our eyes were fixed on the reinforced glass enclosure at the center of the room, where a feat of science, thought impossible until today, paced restlessly. We had done it. We had brought a velociraptor back from extinction. I could hardly contain my excitement, watching the creature's sleek, scaled body move with a predatory grace. Its sharp talons clicked against the metal floor of its enclosure, and each hiss sent shivers down my spine. This wasn't just a dinosaur. It was a symbol of our team's dedication, of breaking barriers in genetic engineering. But amidst the celebration, I couldn't shake off a niggling sense of unease. "Dr. Morgan, its behavior," one of my colleagues, Dr. Samuels, began, his voice tinged with apprehension. "It's more aggressive than we anticipated." I nodded, observing the raptor's unnerving gaze that seemed to study us as much as we studied it. It was as if it understood its newfound place in a world that had long moved on without its kind. In the following days, the raptor's aggression escalated. It thrashed against the walls of its enclosure, emitting guttural calls that echoed through the lab's sterile halls. We administered tranquilizers, but they seemed to have little effect. Then, there was the green chemical, the linchpin of our resurrection process. It glowed ominously in its vials, a Pandora's box of untapped potential and unforeseen consequences. Some of my team, who had handled it directly, started falling ill, showing symptoms that baffled even our medical experts. Headaches, fever, and most disturbingly, a strange lethargy that seemed to drain the life from their eyes. I should have seen the signs then, should have realized that we were meddling with forces beyond our control. But my ambition, our ambition, blinded us. The situation spiraled out of control on a Thursday evening. The lab was quieter, with most of the staff gone for the day. I was in my office, poring over research notes when the alarm blared. The raptor had escaped. Rushing to the control room, I saw the chaos unfold on the security monitors. The raptor had exploited a flaw in the enclosure, a weakness we hadn't anticipated. It moved with terrifying intelligence and precision, its eyes gleaming with a mix of primal hunger and something unnervingly close to malice. As I watched it disappear into the labyrinth of the facility, I knew this was just the beginning. The breach was more than an escape. It was a herald of the chaos that was about to descend upon the city. We had resurrected a relic from the past, but in doing so, we had unleashed something far more sinister. The raptor was out there, and with it, the mysterious illness that seemed to emanate from the green chemical. Our creation had become our nightmare, and the city's streets were about to become its hunting grounds. So let's talk about the day our city went completely bonkers. I'm Maysin, by the way, just your average journalist with a knack for being in the wrong place at the right time. The morning after the big lab fiasco with the dinosaur, yeah, a real-life dinosaur, I grabbed my camera and hit the streets. If you think waking up to news of a velociraptor on the loose in your city is nuts, try sipping your coffee while watching it on live TV. The streets were in total chaos. People were running every which way, and the sounds of sirens and choppers filled the air. It was like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, only real and way more terrifying. I mean, who expects to see a prehistoric creature darting between cars in downtown traffic? But here's the kicker. It wasn't just the raptor causing a ruckus. I started noticing something else. Something weirder. People were getting sick, but not your typical flu sick. We're talking bizarre sick. Some folks who had been near the lab were showing symptoms that seemed straight out of a zombie flick. Pale skin, sluggish moves, and a look in their eyes that screamed, "I'm not feeling quite myself today." I decided to get closer to the action, which, in hindsight, wasn't my brightest idea. I found myself face to face with the raptor on Maple Street. That thing was like a lizard out of hell, all teeth and claws and rippling muscles. But the real horror show? It was changing, right before my eyes. Its skin was getting this weird, zombie-like vibe, and its eyes... Let's just say I won't be forgetting those soulless pits anytime soon. I did what any sane person would do. I ran. As I sprinted down alleys and leaped over trash cans, I realized this story was way bigger than just a dinosaur escape. We were dealing with some freaky virus straight out of the lab, a double whammy of dinosaur and zombie mayhem. I made it back to my apartment, locked the door, and slid down against it, panting. The city was turning into a full-blown horror show, and I had front-row seats. Little did I know, this was just the opening act. The real chaos was about to begin. Reporting from what's starting to look like the set of the world's worst horror movie. After the whole dinosaur breaks out and turns into a zombie incident, which, by the way, is a sentence I never thought I'd say, things in our city went from bad to, "Are you kidding me?" real quick. So, Dr. Lena Morgan, the genius behind our current prehistoric nightmare, decided she couldn't just sit back and let her creation turn the city into a buffet for zombie dinos. She teamed up with us, a bunch of survivors who were equally enthusiastic about not becoming dino dinner or joining the ranks of the Walking Dead. Our squad was a mix and match of people you wouldn't usually see hanging out together. There was Tony, a gym instructor who suddenly found a more practical use for his strength training. Sarah, a school teacher who turned out to be surprisingly good with a makeshift spear. And then there was me, Maysin, your friendly neighborhood reporter, wishing I had paid more attention during those self-defense classes. The streets were a scene of chaos, abandoned cars, shattered storefronts, and here and there, the unnerving sight of a raptor darting between buildings. It was like a scene straight out of a dinosaur documentary, only the dinosaurs had a taste for human flesh. And let's not forget the zombies. They were everywhere, ambling around looking for their next bite. It was a virus outbreak story with a prehistoric twist. We quickly learned that this virus was no joke. It spread through bites and scratches, just like in the movies. But these weren't your average zombies. Some of them were half-dinosaur, half-human creatures straight out of a sci-fi horror flick. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, we found out that some of the smaller dinosaurs from Dr. Morgan's lab had also caught the virus. They were roaming the streets, adding a whole new level of terror to our already dire situation. The moment of truth came when we received a distress call from a group trapped in the subway station. Imagine this, a dark, echoing underground maze with flickering lights and the constant threat of a zombie or dino lurking around every corner. We crept through the dimly lit tunnels, jumping at every shadow and sound. Every corner we turned felt like it could be our last. But amidst all the fear, there was a moment that reminded us of what we were fighting for. We found a group of scared but uninfected people, including a few kids who were trying their best to be brave. Their relief at seeing us was a much-needed reminder that there was still hope, that we could still do something to turn this nightmare around. After what felt like an eternity, we managed to escort them back to the surface. It was a small victory, but in times like these, you take what you can get. As we emerged into the dim light of the city, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and dread. We had saved a few lives, but our city was still overrun with horrors the likes of which no one had ever seen before. After managing not to become appetizers in the subway, Dr. Morgan dropped a bombshell on us. She had a hunch. The same eerie green goop responsible for turning our city into a B-movie horror set might also be the key to reversing it. Talk about irony. So there we were, a motley crew of survivors, about to break into the lab that was essentially the birthplace of our current end-of-days scenario. The plan was pretty straightforward. Get in, grab any research and remnants of the green stuff, and get out before becoming dinner or a member of the undead fan club. Navigating the city was like being in a real-life video game, only with higher stakes, like your life is literally on the line high. We ducked and dodged through hordes of zombies, skirted around some alarmingly quick mini dino-zombies, seriously, who knew? And at one point, had to take cover in a dumpster to avoid a raptor patrol. Trust me, nothing says bonding experience quite like hiding in trash together. Reaching the lab felt like stepping onto a movie set after the actors have left. Papers were strewn about, screens flickered with static, and the occasional zombified scientist shambled past. The silence was unsettling, the kind that amplifies every little sound until your heartbeat sounds like a drum in your ears. Our search was on. We combed through the lab, each of us keenly aware that around any corner, We could come face to face with a scaled nightmare. The tension was palpable, a mixture of fear and the thrill of being so close to a potential cure. Then, as if on cue, our dino-themed horror show upped the ante. A pack of zombie raptors, possibly attracted by our presence or just hunting in their new playground, stumbled upon us. It was chaos. We ran, scrambled, and for those brave, or crazy enough, fought back. It was a scene right out of a survivalist's handbook, if survivalists prepared for zombie-dinosaur apocalypses. In the midst of the chaos, amidst the snapping jaws and clawed feet, we hit pay dirt. Dr. Morgan found her precious research notes and samples of the green chemical. It was a win, but it came at a cost. Not all of us made it back, and the weight of their sacrifice hung heavily on our shoulders as we returned to our hideout. As the dust settled on our ragtag lab, we all stood in a moment of tense anticipation. Dr. Morgan, with a vial of the newly synthesized cure in her hand, looked like a warrior scientist, equal parts determined and exhausted. Her hands, though steady, betrayed the immense pressure of the moment. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The plan was risky, but straightforward. Administer the cure to a few captured zombie dinos, proving its effectiveness. If it worked, we'd have a fighting chance to reclaim our city. The first test subject was a smaller dinosaur, its once powerful frame now a grotesque blend of scales and undead flesh. As Dr. Morgan injected the cure, we all held our breath. Minutes felt like hours. Slowly, the creature's jerky, unnatural movements began to smooth out. The cloudy, lifeless eyes cleared, and for the first time since this nightmare began, we saw a glimmer of the creature it once was. It was working. Emboldened by this success, we quickly set out to distribute the cure. Our plan was to load up a few drones with the vials and fly them into the densest zombie and dino zones. It was a high-tech solution in a low-tech battle, and it felt fittingly surreal. I took charge of the broadcast, sending out a continuous loop message, offering hope and instructions on finding and administering the cure. My voice, once used for reporting local events and weather, was now a beacon in this dystopian landscape. Meanwhile, the streets were still a scene from a horror film. Our building, once a nondescript office block, now bore the scars of the battle. Windows were boarded up, walls were pockmarked with bullet holes, and the entrance was a makeshift fortress. As we prepared to send out the drones, the building shuddered under a new assault. A horde of zombie dinos, drawn by the noise and activity, had descended upon us. The fight was frantic and fierce. We were defenders on our last stand, fighting not just for our lives, but for the hope of a cure. In the midst of the chaos, a drone took off, whirring into the sky. One by one, they followed, each carrying a vial of salvation. We watched as they disappeared into the city, our hearts heavy with the weight of what was at stake. The battle raged on, but slowly, the tide began to turn. Reports came in over the radio. The cure was working. People who had barricaded themselves away were venturing out, using the cure on any infected they found. The city, which had been on the brink of losing its soul, was fighting back with newfound vigor. As night fell, a hush began to settle over the city. The once relentless waves of attackers were thinning. We dared to hope that the worst was over. Exhausted, we gathered in what was once the lobby, now a makeshift command center. The cure was a success, but the cost had been high. We had lost friends and colleagues, and the city would bear the scars of this battle for years to come. But in that moment, there was a sense of unity and strength among us. We had faced the unimaginable and emerged not just survivors, but victors. The road to rebuilding was long, but for the first time since this nightmare began, it felt possible. As the first rays of dawn broke over the city, they brought with them a sense of renewal. We had taken back our home, not just from the clutches of a prehistoric nightmare, but from the brink of oblivion. The day was ours again, and with it came the promise of a new beginning.